Thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm sure we'll have a couple others trickling in. Today's workshop is going to be all about customer-centric growth strategies for mobile-first brands. Just a couple of logistics before we get started. Remember, if you have a question for today's webinar, please use the Q&A function on the Zoom panel. If you're having technical difficulties, feel free to use the chat function and we can help you out there. Any questions that you have, we will cover those at the end of the presentation. If you have any technical issues, again, just let us know and we'll try to help out. So wanted to quickly go through the agenda before we begin. My name is Megan and I manage the North America marketing at MoEngage. I'm joined today by Mateus from Tally, Gregory from AB Tasty, one of our partners, and Christina, who is my colleague at MoEngage. In this 45-minute workshop, we're going to share with you some concepts and frameworks for building organic growth strategies. Our hope is that you're going to be able to walk away with some concepts and techniques that you can apply to your own strategy for next year. So at the end of the workshop, we'll have some time for questions and we'll get all of those answered. And for now, I'm going to pass it over to Mateus and he's going to kick off the first section.
Thank you so much, Megan. Hey everyone, I'm Mateus Honrado. I'm a growth lead at Tally. I've been at the company for a little over 2.5 years now, and for those of you who don't know what Tally is about, basically we built the first fully automated credit card debt manager, and today we're helping thousands of members to be able to pay off their credit card debt faster and also save money on interest. So through my experience at Tally, I've been able to be part of like the front state of what the current world looks like today in terms of acquisition. So I think we can all relate to this small equation. We have less channels where we can advertise efficiently. We see more competition across the board. I don't know if the people that are attending this workshop are focused on the fintech space, but we have seen the fintech CACs raising by over 55%. And this has basically turned into a channel saturation. It's really hard to put an extra dollar, spend an extra dollar on our marketing mix without and not be able to find that efficiency and not being able to find that scale that we all look for. And on top of that, we also see that attribution and measurement is basically a mess. Like we all saw what's going to happen. We all saw the announcement from Apple that IDFA is going to be going away early this next year. We know from what Chrome has announced that in 2022, third-party cookies are going away. So it's not only that the top of funnel channels are becoming more and more saturated and it's harder to efficiently spend that extra dollar, it's also becoming harder and harder to understand the efficiency and where we need to allocate that extra marketing dollar that we have. And kind of like to wrap up where we are today and why these product-led growth frameworks are important. We have seen in these historically how product teams and marketing teams, they have had really very little overlap between each other. So we see marketing and growth taking care of the top of funnel, organic acquisition, paid acquisition, partnerships, and then we have the product teams working on tech debt, new product features, or the user research, but there's no overlap or communication between what these teams are doing. And basically, that's like a recipe for failure, especially with the circumstances that we are today going through. So higher cost of acquisition, less visibility, and less tracking capabilities. And lastly, like this disconnection between the product and growth. So the frameworks that we're going to be sharing today are a way and a method for you to kind of like be able to cover this bridge between these gaps. And just to start with, I want to do a quick recap on what growth is about. And this is a quote from Matt Evans. He was my previous manager at Earnest, the student loan refi company. And basically, his basically he stated that the core principles of a growth team are: one, to reduce friction, and second, to accelerate the value that the user perceive from our product. And it's really important to be able to make a distinction between these two. So reduce friction talks about all of the user onboarding flow, or all of the user lifecycle, from acquisition, activation, retention, and monetization. And this then is, on top of that, we start working on how we can accelerate the value that the user perceive from our product. So how we make sure that the user is getting the core value prop of what we're offering as fast as possible. And this lets us to answer the question, so what is this product-led growth about? What is what we're talking about today? So plain simple, product-led growth is this user-focused growth model where product is the actual growth engine, and it's the primary driver of customer acquisition, conversions, and the expansion, or how we're thinking about product market fit across different functions and product that we're building. And a way that is really good for us to structure and how we can better lay down this strategy and this framework is by thinking on what is that actual growth formula that we want to build. And this is an example from Chamath Palihapitiya. He was one of the early head of growth at Facebook, where basically he defined the sustainable growth equation on what are the initiatives that we're doing on the top of funnel. So where are we getting our traffic from? What is our conversion rates? How are we converting these users? Then we jump into what is that aha moment that we are looking for the user to experience through our products. So that can help us then move that emotional response higher on our product cycle. And lastly, about how do we think about our core product value as a way to keep expanding our offering and to keep expanding the reach to the market that we want to target. So by having those three pillars, we can start talking about how to build a sustainable growth engine. And I think many companies are still, they say that they're fully aligned with this end user view, but I think the biggest issue is that we usually tend to think about it in a small aspect. So we tend to think about end user when we talk about design, or when we are talking about pricing, but those are some important things to consider, but they are small parts of this greater whole that we're trying to build, and this flywheel that we're trying to build through our growth engine by using these product-led growth tactics. And this is today basically expressed even in the S1 filings of some of the biggest companies out there. And I guess everyone heard the news of Salesforce acquiring Slack yesterday, but for about I think $25 billion. So all of the best companies out there have recognized this market shift, and they are putting the end user at the core of their product and at the core of the business experience. So we have Airbnb talking about how in 2020, 91% of their online traffic has came through organic. We have Slack talking about how this growth flywheel that they have generated through their product has enabled them to grow organically. And then even other fintech companies like Affirm, where even though they work in a B2B way, they have been able to create these same organic growth loops within the product itself, rather than relying on top of funnel acquisition or making changes to the product solely for the purpose of making version optimizations, or making sure that the users are engaging with the product itself. So that leads us to this overall framework that each one of us can apply into the organization. We have started to do this at Tally, and this has helped us basically separate how we think about product, and how product touch each of the different user experience. How it touch all of the different experiences of the users through the journey that they have within our product. So how we think about onboarding, how we think about training, super important, how we think about technical support, cross-sell, lead generation, acquisition. So we have all of the different departments of the organization actually having an input into the way that the product is built and the way that the product is actually affecting each of these teams, and how this is helping us get more and more these product-led growth flywheels effects going. So let's put one example here. When we talk about technical support, we have all had that experience where we call a company, we are waiting in line for 45 minutes. If you think about it on a product-led growth perspective, when you start thinking about technical support or user support, then you can start like basically making that shift into how that specific action that the user is taking can have an impact on our overall growth strategy. So how having a better support team or having a better product that can help easily support the users, that can create a better experience, which tends to then create more engagement, create more word of mouth, create more organic growth, and we have this flywheel effect going. And I want to just go through three clear examples of how these frameworks is put into practice. So we have three points here, and I think this is really important when we're thinking about product-led growth. So the first one is that value comes first, money later. We are developing a product that is really easy to onboard today. It's really easy to onboard and get started. And lastly, we have this personalization factor, and we are accelerating the time to value for each of our users. So if we jump into the specific examples here, we have one coming from this company called Public. They're an investment. They're our investment company. And basically, through their onboarding flow, after you have signed up for their product, they offer you to pick one of the stocks, and then they give you basically they give you $5 for you to invest on that stock. So they're pushing the value of the product right at the beginning of the onboarding flow. So once that you have already picked that stock that you like, once that you have invested those $5, then you are already hooked into what's the value prop, what are you going to get out of the product, and then you finish doing all of the rest of the onboarding flow. Something similar you should be considering for your company. So how you bring some of that value first, and then you start the experience of the product itself, and then you can monetize that user. If we go now to the example of Tesla, we can see that basically they have reinvented the way that you can buy a car. So everything happens online, super easy to onboard into the process. Just with that click, just a few clicks away, you have your Tesla, and a couple of days have it at your door. All of this optimization happens on the back end, so there's no sales process driven interactions between the user and the company. And because all of this is product driven, it's easier to change, to iterate on, and keep making improvements over that user experience with your product. And lastly, if we go to the next slide, is the time to value. So, and the personalization factor. So we have, in this case, Duolingo, where after you have created your account, you start going through this personalization experience where you can pick the language that you want to learn, how are you going to be learning this, and why you're going to be learning this language. They even make you choose a path. So all of those are actions that help you segmentate your user audience to make sure that you are giving the right type of value back to that specific user. And before you jump into the product experience, they show you an MVP experience of what you're going to be going through their product. So right out of the bat, they ask you, if you pick to learn French, they're going to ask you, hey, how you define this on French? So at the end, they are pushing that product experience, that the core value prop of your product into the user onboarding. So that way they can make sure that they can basically get going with pushing higher that product efficiency and making sure that the value of the product is in the user flow before they start actually get monetized or going through the experience. Next slide. So that's basically the overall of the framework. I'm going to pass it now to Gregory. He's going to be talking more about driving growth through mobile experimentation and personalization.
Thanks, Matthias. That was a great presentation, and I'm definitely a big, advocate for the PLG model. I think, thanks, Matthias. I think, I love what these sort of product-led growth brands are doing. I think they're driving really awesome experiences, and there's a lot of great examples out there. So I wanted to take a few minutes to go through continuing to on that growth trajectory, growth path, talk about experimentation and personalization, and how to do that on mobile. And I want to give you a few numbers on mobile app usage, and two, as Matthias did, a few examples of what type of things you can do on your apps for testing, and maybe give you a few ideas of what you could do. So that's what I'd like to do today. So quickly, 1 second around A/B Tasty. We're what we call an experience optimization platform. What we do is traditional testing, so A/B testing, split MVT testing on on your front end devices, mainly the website and mobile websites. We do AI-powered personalization, so deep segmentation, ability to target the right message at the right time to the right people. We also have the ability to do that on mobile apps, which is our feature management platform. And we also have customer insights capabilities with heat maps, session recordings on your websites, and NPS customer feedback. And basically what we are able to do is to plug in this platform directly with any type of data that you may have as a customer. So it could be a CRM or a CDP like Telium, or a Segment, a data layer, data lake, whatever it is. It plugs in seamlessly. So just wanted to give you a quick 1 second on us and what we do. Quickly on some of the stats here. About 90% of smartphone time is spent in apps. So apps are a core piece of smartphones, and you'll see that there's really, you need to get that traction and that engagement and that user, that awesome UX, that awesome UI for the user. It's very important in terms of what's happening, on mobile phones. And if you look at the mobile app usage, I have a few more stats here. SaaS and e-commerce user engagement for mobile is 30 to 50%. Users' time is spent in their top 3 apps, 78%. So that's, to go and get your share of voice on the apps of people, it's not easy. And 65% of people download 0 apps a month. So it's very important that you're coming back again to Matthias' presentation, delivering that awesome user experience, that a no friction type experience is very important to ensure that the users are definitely connected to your app and have that stickiness. And coming back again to stickiness, 77% of users drop in the first 72 hours. And you need to have that aha moment as soon as possible. Getting that stickiness, giving that value up front, and then monetizing it later but building that value, building that stickiness, and giving value to the user as soon as possible. And that creates a stickiness, that creates the engagement, and that also creates, the ultimate user experience you want to deliver to your customers. And 80% of app revenue comes from loyal users again. So it's key and important to be able to deliver that awesomeness. And you want to have that no friction experience, and consumers are demanding this today. Consumers want speed, they want no friction, they want an easy application, they want a 1, 2, 3 type option, and they want it very graphical, very easy. Like the Duolingo example before was a very good. I use Duolingo to learn Spanish. I'm not great at it, but it's very easy, it's very intuitive, and they do a great job. And that's very important to be able to do that, to drive revenue for your business and for your mobile app. And I'm going to give you now a few examples of mobile apps and mobile tests that were done by some brands. So here's an example from Biotherm. They're a lotion company, and basically navigation here is a simple example, but just making some experiments and trying new things can have a big impact. And just changing the way putting the logo in the middle instead on the left, and putting the menu on the left, the search bar, your cart, just making that simple change. There was a big increase in terms of on the clicks and more transactions. So these are this very simple tests. You would think, hey, that's not a big deal. But at the end of the day, you got to try and test stuff to figure out what's working or not working. And this simple change here had a pretty significant effect in terms of conversions. Making it very easy for customers to find what they need. Again, coming back to the Duolingo example here before, you want to make it very easy for people to figure out what they want and shorten that process as much as possible. You can't have, let's say, a customer journey that they have to go to 6 pages. They need to go to 2 pages. And you want to make that the shortest possible as you can. So here, again, some examples. This is a toy company. They circled the search bar, they circled the filter bar, and you can select by, you can sort by price or pertinence, whatever it is. And they really showed, like with colors and push the right colors to make it more apparent, if you will. And again, they had a massive increase in terms of clicks and search bars and increase in transactions. And again, it's just these little things that make an impact. And then make it easy to convert. Customers want speed. Customers want to be able to buy in 1 click. You need to give them that option to be able to do that, and to have the ability to show very easily add to bag or add to cart in a very easy way. For example, here on the right side at the bottom, you have the add to bag button. On the left, you have the add to bag button at the top. And that also, again, increased the clicks and the conversions on the Calvin Klein mobile app. And 91% of consumers are really likely to buy from brands that recognize and remember them. So we talked about testing and experimentation. I think personalization is a big word right now, even if the one-to-one personalization is the graal, if you will, the perfection that you want, which takes a journey to get there. But consumers want personalized experiences. They want to feel that they feel special, and brands are really investing in that space right now. And if you look at the experience optimization maturity and the personalization maturity, if you will, from what we call like one to all to one to one, from status quo where you're serving the same thing to everybody, starting to do some testing, starting to do some better targeting, some segmentation. And, I think that where, let's say, the most mature businesses are today is that one to few area where, there's very clear audiences, there's very powerful tools that can allow you to be very selective on who you want to target and what message you want to push at the right time. And you want that automated as much as you can with AI. We see a lot of businesses that are between that testing and optimization and targeting. And, obviously they want to move more and more on the right side of that curve, getting more in that segmentation, synchronization, and one-to-one personalization. And you want to present custom content and unique experiences for unique users. And this, needs to happen in real time and is obviously driven by the user behaviors and attributes. And automation and AI is required to scale. You want to have the tools that allow you to do the heavy lifting for you. So for example, if you want to understand if your customer is engaged or very lightly or is a very loyal customer, that's the thing you want to understand very quickly. And you want the tools to have the ability to give that, let's say, these audiences on a platter to you. And the data that you can get access to is huge right now. With all the martech tools around, you can gather so much data. As an example, at A/B Tasty, you can get in real time more than 250 data points, plus whatever data you have in house. There could be page visited, minimum views, device, geolocation, weather, abandoned cart data, device, new versus returning, funnel stages. So you can do a lot of targeting, a lot of segmentation, and a lot of specific personalized campaigns to the people that are coming and visiting your digital channels. And I'll give you two quick examples just to finish here. Center Parcs is a European chain of vacation centers, if you will, where people rent a little house and they have pool, access to a pool, et cetera, et cetera. But basically what these guys wanted to do is they wanted to increase their end of year bookings by targeting customers in specific segments regarding Christmas and New Year bookings. So what they did is they created a full behavioral campaign and targeted the people that searched dates for Christmas or end of year vacations, that visited their landing pages for Christmas or New Year vacations, that came through paid campaigns for December or end of year campaigns. And from their existing data, took the people that already purchased something around these dates. And basically what they did is they created for that segment of people, that audience, a dedicated visual on their homepage, a personalized tab on the menu, and they delivered as well personalized content on the search results. And obviously that increased some of the bookings. So you can be very specific and very targeted with the capabilities out there in terms of personalization. And another very simple one, which is another French example, but you can target and create a widget based on the weather. So if you're in retail or fashion, you can easily push some specific offers or banners, whatever you want, in a very very easy way, depending on the weather of the location of the person. And that's what you can do from a personalization standpoint. And I will pass it over now to Christina, who will talk about the customer lifecycle.
Awesome. Thank you, Gregory. Great. So guys, my name is Christina Harewood. I am actually a client success partner at MoEngage. I've been intrigued by everything you guys have just been talking about because we're going to kind of wrap all of these themes together in a giant bow. We're excited to be partners with both Tally and A/B Tasty because a lot of what the work that they do from a product perspective helps to, is really foundational for us as we go into drive those consumer relationships that we're looking to build, those brand relationships. So who we are, MoEngage is an insights-led customer engagement platform. What does that mean? It means we do a lot of stuff, right? I've been in the marketing space for 15 or more years on both sides of the coin, more in the SaaS world the last 6 or 7 years. And it's a really robust platform, and we lean in onto data. So what I do in my day-to-day life is I work closely with enterprise level clients and help them to understand and do some of the work that Matthias talked about and Gregory talked about, but also bring that back to how do we then take that and present it to consumers. We lean in on the data to inform that kind of decision making. And we really look to really build those meaningful relationships with users by using our analytics to help create deep segmentation, to help us to engage. What does that mean? Across channel, we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then that keyword that Gregory talked about, which is personalization, and really moving to that one-to-one, which is the holy grail. And as we go along, right, just knowing that things aren't static, continuing to optimize as we go. Next slide. Awesome. So as we've learned through the pandemic, right, we talked about this ability of being really fluid and knowing that a lot of the life cycle or LCM plans that we had pre-pandemic probably became really obsolete when this macro world event happened, right? A lot of the brands that were able to pivot really quickly are those that I think probably felt within this kind of more cyclical perception of life cycle. So what do I mean by that? If we define life cycle, there's 2 typical schools of thought. There's the linear path that drives the users to deeper and deeper engagement. And the assumption is that that is just a kind of snowball effect and a continual build. The cyclical approach really is more realistic in my opinion, because it really does address the ebbs and flows, right? All of the different contextual things that might be happening with the user, but also with our products, right? So there's a huge equation going on there that we also have to be mindful of. And that's why that modern lifecycle management really requires a ton of inputs. And we're going to talk about how you can do that and grow with your users and be agile enough to make those pivots as needed. Next slide. Thank you. So what will we be discussing today? 3 of my favorite features from MoEngage that I leverage a ton for some of the clients that I work with. RFM analysis, which is really the discovery piece of it, helps you to understand. We'll get into that. Flow campaigns, how do we create those cross-channel campaigns and engage users in an effective way? And then one of our new features that I'm really excited about, which is user path analysis, helps us to optimize. And I think we talked about how do we test and understand. So this is one that I think will be really interesting for you guys to hang on to the end to hear about, because it kind of alleviates some of the blind spots that we have day to day. Next slide. So RFM analysis. So recency and frequency monetary analysis is something that we do here at MoEngage. What we know to be true is that even within a vertical, your brand in a fintech space or retail space and your users might behave very differently than users in a very same vertical. And so it's a very bespoke behavior. Like however your users are interacting with you might not always translate to someone else. I think what I run into a ton is clients asking, well, what is that actually good? And I think it's good to have that contextual detail to say, hey, if I look at other retailers, is this good recency, frequency, or monetary thresholds? But more and more, as we become a lot more sophisticated in how we talk to users, and users themselves become more sophisticated in interacting with brands, we have to understand that we are also living in a space where that one-to-one goes both ways. It's one-to-one communication, but it's also the one-to-one in how they react to your brand specifically. So what we use RFM to do is really establish meaningful thresholds that help you to see, well, is 14 days of, if a user has not been active for 14 days, is that something that should raise an alarm bell? And does that even jive with what's going on contextually in the world today? So if you think pre-pandemic, if you're looking at a dormancy threshold of 14 days, post-pandemic, that would have extended greatly to maybe 30 days. And should there be, what do we do with that, right? So I think that this is something that helps you, a lot of our brands actually quickly assess what those activity thresholds should be and reevaluate those on a continual basis. It helps you to define what I call virtuous actions. Those are, we want that conversion that drives towards a monetary end goal, but there are also steps to that. And I think that both Matthias and Gregory talked about some of the paths too, that their platforms or products help you to unpack as well. Like where are people clicking? What are they doing before they actually transact with you? And then also help you to identify some of the pivot points. Where is some of the drop off happening? I think real quick before we move to the next slide, rich segmentation is really a key to this approach. We've seen one of our, I think it's a retail brand in our Asia market, see a 30% increase in retention, kind of leaning in on this RFM analysis piece. Next slide. So when we unpack the levels of value from this RFM analysis, what do you get, right? So oftentimes we're looking for that intersection between the three pieces, right? High spend, recent visit, and high frequency. I'm of the camp that that spectrum is there for a reason. And so yes, those are our power users. They're probably organically doing what we want them to do anyway. We need to understand why and how they're doing that. But to get to a place where we nudge the other folks along, what we do in our platform is through the RFM analysis, we can assign a score to users and basically create these buckets that you see here on the right, from champions to lost users, and give you some insight as to who is falling into these buckets, how many, what ratio of your users, and how to kind of nudge them along to keep them moving forward. It's really a moving target. And I think it really, again, is this kind of bespoke to the brand to understand where that value really lies. Do you want someone who's coming in and spending a lot frequently, or is it best to have someone, or the expectation to have someone come in less frequently but spend more? I think that that's something that the levers that brands will need to kind of pull for themselves that RFM helps them to do. Next slide. Awesome. So from RFM, which is giving you that kind of high level view of these trends, right? What are people doing? How frequently? How much are they spending? How recent have they come? And what kind of value can I assign to them? To talking to these folks, right? So the other feature that we have in our platform is called Flows. And Flows is basically our messaging, omni-channel messaging product within MoEngage. It's cross-channel, like I said, so we support push, email, and in-app to reach users where they are. So once you understand some of those activity thresholds, you can use a flow campaign across these channels to kind of move people along. So flow campaigns work in a way that you can set up a push, and based on the user's interaction with that particular message, you can send another, and you can set different durations for stuff like that. Flow campaigns really provide an expanded channel reach, an opportunity to test and learn. We support control groups in flows. We also support the ability to test within the different messages, as you see here on the right, different message variants to see what's performing best. And a team is continuing to kind of blow this out, if you will, so you can start to actually test different branches. So that's to come. But one of the ways that we've seen flows really work well, if you go to the next slide, is for some of my clients, one of the best features that I love in flows is the ability for flow campaigns to kind of chauffeur users from one LCM campaign, if you will, to another. And these can be converted users. So users who've actually done what you wanted them to do in the flow, you drop them into a new flow. I've seen this work really well for one of our clients in particular, for that install to trial to conversion flow. So 3 flows set up. Once they install, how do we treat them to get them to trial? Once they start a trial, how do we educate them and get them to understand, like Matthias was saying, that value right away and onboard them to really want to subscribe at the end on the back end of that. And you can start to see how these LCM campaigns connected together really work well to do that. Retargeting is another thing that works really well for retargeting for win back, upselling, and also for repurchase. Next slide. And then the one thing that we don't get from an RFM analysis or flows in particular, albeit one client actually did with their flow campaign realize that users were coming in and there was a set delay, but before that delay elapsed to get the message, they were organically converting. So that was a learning there. But in instances where those learnings aren't happening for you in that way, right? Because that was something that they stumbled into. User path analysis is one of my favorite features. And I'm saying that with my marketing hat on. This is something that I know that brands pay tons of money for or are willing to, because what it does is, if you could answer the question, what happens after a user installs, or what is a user doing right before an uninstall event happens? What happens, or what is a user doing after they get my message, right? If they haven't converted, what did they do? These are all questions that the user path analysis can actually answer for marketers. So really those blind spots where we're kind of guessing that, like, what does a user do? Did they actually, if they didn't convert, what did they do? You can start to kind of map this out using this new feature in MoEngage, right? So we can see what users are doing organically or after being messaged. This allows us to validate virtuous actions and understand pivot points. If a user's coming in, maybe searching, it could even uncover those friction points that we talked about, right? Like if they're coming in and we're seeing them search and then just drop off, we can start to, and that's happening continually. Is there something with that search functionality? That's something you can turn back now to a partner like AB Tasty or Tally and say, hey, let's test that out. Let's see if there's something there for us to kind of noodle with to see if that changes and moves the needle one way or the other. You can look at the good and you can look at the bad. I'm an advocate of not only looking at where things are growing, also looking at where things might not be going in the direction that we want, because that's really where the learnings are. And so understanding or unpacking that path to uninstall is also something that is also pretty critical for marketers. And I think, again, going back to Gregory's slide, 77% of people, you're not lasting on their phone if you're not driving that value equation. And so we understand what's driving an uninstall. This is something that, again, for me, is like the holy grail. And we're still kind of noodling with this. I'm working with some clients on this right now. But this is a really rich feature that can help to kind of plug in some areas within the user lifecycle that we might not necessarily have a purview on in such a seamless visual way. So to tie it all together, from MoEngage perspective, the three features or products that we lean in on are RFM, like I said, to understand like the basics. What are users doing right now? How do we set those activity thresholds? How do we reassess those? When should we? So you can understand and define those. Flows to act and test. So that's when you're actually messaging and driving towards engagement and conversion. And then that user path analysis really to validate and optimize what you are doing day to day across the first two. So I think that these three together in conjunction are really strong way to kind of move your brand forward. And using these kind of data points can help you fine tune your messaging and engagement approach overall.
Thanks so much, Christina, and thank you, Matthias and Gregory, for all of your insights as well. Just to wrap up before we go into Q&A, we wanted to provide a couple key takeaways from our speakers. So I'll just read these over for the line from Matthias. Product-led growth is upon us. Many software tech companies are still relying on decades-old advice about sales and marketing, like growth models that are human-dependent and untenable in the current market environment. Gregory, create captivating experiences for your users during their first interactions with your app to solidify their adoption. Presenting value quickly will drive user adoption and create most of your lifetime value. And then from Christina, lifecycle management is not static, nor is it one size fits all. Therefore, it's necessary to stay fluid in your segmentation approach and meet users where they are in the life cycle with your brand, means understanding who they are in the moment, what your brand has to offer their lifestyle. So thank you all again. We are going to go into a quick poll. We're offering any attendees on the line a consultation if they would like one. Just say yes. If not, no worries, but we just thought we would help knowing that 2021 is quickly approaching. And, I'm sure all of us are very focused on our strategies for next year. All right, so let's, we'll close the poll. And we'll go right into Q&A. So we did have a couple of questions already coming in. For those on the line, if you want to ask a question to one of our speakers, just use the Q&A tab in the Zoom console. So this first one is for Matthias. You provided some great growth frameworks. If you haven't applied these before, where is the best place to start?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And the way that we approach it at Tally was by looking inwards and understand where does the product team sits in the organization, because basically 100% of these frameworks are product driven. You need to really understand what's the role and where does the product organization sits across your company. So by looking at that, understanding where in that org chart and who are the responsibles from your product team, you can then start like driving some of these initiatives. And if, for example, if you're working in the growth or in the marketing team, you can start sitting down with the correct people across the table to really push these initiatives forwards and really like start getting the product team aligned with marketing, with sales, with customer support. So I think the best place to start by far is by understanding where this product lives within the organization, and then how you can start influencing those teams in order to start creating these frameworks that are, as the name says, product-led driven.
Great, thank you. Gregory, this one is probably best for you. When it comes to personalizing your app, how do you know when to draw the line between helpful and annoying?
It's a good question. You don't want to have too many in-app messages popping up all the time. I think what's important is, as a business and as a growth manager or a product owner, you want to have a clear roadmap and an ideation process in terms of what you want to test and what you want to personalize. And I think that's the first step, is to set up your ideas and then set up your roadmaps and then do a step-by-step approach. So you can't do everything at once. You gotta, you can't do 25 tests at once. You gotta do, okay, let's try this versus this option, change this menu versus this menu. Let's change the size of the images on the app, whatever it is, and gradually do that, or start to push more notifications. And you got to test and look at your KPIs. If you see that your engagement levels or response levels go down because you're pushing too much pushes to the users, you got to be careful. You got to monitor on a day-to-day basis your KPIs and understand what's the right balance. And I think looking at the numbers is a key thing on a day-to-day basis to ensure that you're not stepping into the annoyance bit, if you will. So having a good set of a good roadmap, ensuring that you're having that gradual approach and looking at your KPIs is, I think, how I would put it.
Great, thanks, Gregory. We have time for one more question. So Christina, how often should brands revisit their life cycle management plans?
Yeah, that's a good one. I tend to advise clients to look at this every 2 quarters or so, right? Just to give time to marinate. You can look at it annually as well, but it definitely is something that should be a part of your Marcom strategy. I think that there's also, again, staying fluid, there's flexibility there. When macro things happen, like a pandemic, obviously that's something, a catalyst for that kind of reevaluation. The good news is it's really easy to do, at least with our tool, to kind of go in and just keep a pulse on what's going on. So even if you do an analysis, like an RFM analysis, to understand what those lifestyle tiers are, activity tiers, and understand where your users are falling, you can decide when you want to act on that, right? So you can do that as frequently as you want, just to keep a pulse on it. In terms of acting on it, though, just giving users time to kind of come in and giving different user cohorts time to come in, kind of marinate and live with the brand a little bit, so you get true meaningful insights. I think every 6 months to a year, in a normal situation, again, with the ability to pivot, right? Because we can do this, see what's going on, have a watchful eye, and then act on these things within our campaigns at a later date.
Great. Thank you so much, Christina. So that's all the time that we have for today. We'd like to thank everyone on the line for joining us. If you want to get in touch, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're going to follow up with a recording of the session in the coming days. And just want to take a moment to thank all of our presenters for their time today and for sharing their insights with us. We hope you were able to take something away, and have a great rest of your week. And we look forward to having you at our next event. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.